Greetings, I'm Jennifer Kennedy, the lead for quality at CHAP, and welcome to this month's CHAPcast. Today I have my colleague and friend Bobbie Warner here to help us learn about the top hospice deficiencies at CHAP. Hey Bobbie, how you doing today?
Hey, I'm fine, Jennifer. How are you?
I am fantastic. Bobbie, for those who don't know you out there, could you tell them a little bit about yourself and your role that you have at CHAP?
Sure. I guess I'll start at the beginning where in 2009, I started as a site visitor, and I had the privilege of being a site visitor for 6.5 years, which was a great foundation for where I am today. I actually, did visits from north to south, Alaska, Hawaii, east to west, and even did the first international visit in Saudi Arabia. So
Oh my gosh.
I know, it was quite an experience. I then moved into a role of senior accreditation manager just for a short bit, started that role, and then moved into director of accreditation. And those of you who were in the mid-Atlantic states or down near central South Texas and Oklahoma, Louisiana, around that area, you might recognize my name. I then moved in March of 2020. Okay, we all remember what March of 2020
Oh
was.
my gosh, not the March of 2020.
Yes, the March of 2020, almost to the day, into the role of director of education, and pretty much spent 2020 doing hardly anything except education, development of resources, webinars for COVID, right?
Right.
So that was an interesting time frame, and I was glad to be able to help our providers through that. And then I moved into the helping the Center for Excellence. It was going to be a 3 to 4 month stint, and it's been 2 years, and I'm still here. So I conduct all the accreditation intensives pretty much, and then also work with home health care operations and oversee the 6 disease management certifications we have, which I really am enjoying watching those grow. So part of that is I keep an eye on the top 10. And I like doing that. I pretty much have been doing that for several years now. And I know which ones stay the same and which ones tend to move around a bit.
Oh my gosh. So that's a lot that you're doing. And thank you, because that's such important work that you're doing. Today, you're going to regale us with the top 10 hospice deficiencies here at CHAP. So again, this is, my background is not so much home health, but hospice. So I'm always interested to see what is happening deficiency wise with providers out there. So let's start from the lowest to the highest, shall we?
I'll tell you what, let's start with what's not on the list.
Oh my gosh. All right.
Do you mind if I do that?
No, go for it.
Oh, okay. And you'll know the reason I'm saying that real soon. So there are 2 findings that didn't make the top 10 that are almost always on the top 10. So that's why I think it's important to talk about them. One is under care delivery and treatment, and it's the content of a discharge summary. And that, when a patient is either revokes the benefit or is a live discharge, there should be a good detailed summary. I think our hospice folks don't do those quite so often. And right, you agree?
Yeah.
So they don't.
Yeah, they don't. No, it's not probably like on the home health side, right? Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. So that one wasn't real surprising to me, but the next one that it wasn't on the top 10 was surprising. And it's HCPC 13I, which is related to the initial bereavement assessment.
Oh. So meaning that it's completed as part of the comprehensive assessment?
Absolutely.
Wow.
And, that finding has been in the top 10 for as long as I can remember, really.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
Yeah. So it kind of amazed me that it wasn't in the top 10. And, in our accreditation intensives, we talk a lot, and this past 3 years have been difficult for certain hospices to be able to get their chaplains or social workers, those folks who might do a more comprehensive bereavement assessment,
yes,
into the home, right?
Right.
And they're identifying ways. They must be identifying ways to get it done anyway because it's not on the top 10 list this year.
Oh, I'm happy to hear people are getting their initial bereavement assessment.
I'm sure you are. So, just as a note to our listeners, this is based upon all of the site visits that occurred for hospice in 2022 and the collated findings from that time frame. So, this
Okay.
is from January to the end of December. All right, so now we'll start with that top 10. And I don't want people to forget about, especially that bereavement assessment. We'd like to see that continue to not be on the top 10. So the number 10 and number 9 are actually new ones for us. And 10 is HCPC 18I, and the L tag is 538. And it's that the plan of care must specify hospice care and services necessary to meet the patient family specific needs as the needs relate to the terminal illness and related conditions.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I wouldn't have thought that would have been something that would track
No,
onto a top 10.
I agree with you. I have a feeling what might be happening is that there is a lack of individualization.
Oh, okay. Well, that would make sense. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And that might be why that is that way. I mean, the only way I would know for sure is to look at every single site visit, and there's not enough time to do that.
Absolutely.
Okay, the number 9 is HCDT 39I. And if this is in relation to discharge, when a patient revokes the election of the hospice care, the hospice must forward a copy of the discharge summary to the attending physician.
So that's not
Now,
happening? Wow.
it's not happening, and I'm a little surprised that it's not happening to the point that it becomes a top 10. Are you?
Uh, I mean, I'm disappointed to hear that. I mean, that's part of the coordination of care is, you're if the patient does have an attending physician, you're giving them back to that attending to take care of all of their care needs. So if we're
Mm-hmm.
not, giving them as a provider a discharge summary, to me, that's a huge gap. Just
Yes, I agree. And I was a little surprised by that. So those were new ones that replaced the other two that I told you about earlier.
mhm.
Now, you're not going to like this one, okay?
Okay.
And it is HIPC 9.I. So you know what IPC is,
Mhm.
that infection prevention and control. And this is interesting to me, Jennifer, because it comes up every time we look at the top 10, and it's in regards to the organization following occupational exposure as it relates to TB.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay. That's interesting. And I know I you know, eh, TB isn't rampant in all areas of the country. You and I know that, but you have to pay
Mm-hmm.
attention to your local health department to see if it is, what's your protocol for TB testing? If somebody has positive or, what's your steps after that, right?
Right.
Generally, I think we are comfortable to say is follow the CDC recommendations, right?
Absolutely. Unless they have state specific requirements.
Exactly. But they still should be paying attention to their local health department, right?
Yes, yes, and sometimes people don't quite know where to go for that guidance, and
Mhm.
you're absolutely right. The local health department, and then looking at the CDC guidelines, and oh, I forget how far long back it was. I want to say 2018 or so. They loosened those requirements a little bit.
They
So,
did. Yeah.
or yeah, so organizations, really want to look and get the most updated version. So HIPC is infection prevention and control. And fortunately, that is the only infection prevention and control. So what that tells me is our hospice offices do a good job of hand hygiene and bag technique because those are typically in the top 10. So
Yeah, that's good to know. I mean,
that
yeah.
is
I mean, you never wanna see anything, in the infection control, COP, but, it's good to know that, hand hygiene especially didn't come up. as a top 10.
Exactly. I agree. All right. Number 7 is HCDT. Now, HCDT, that's care delivery and treatment. So that's care after that initial assessment is completed, the initial plan of care, and what goes on a time to time basis. The L tag with that is 625, and I have a feeling a lot of our listeners know that tag very well. And its written patient care instructions for a hospice aide are prepared by the RN who is responsible for supervision of the aide. Now, I don't think that the requirement is hit because there's no patient care instructions. What do you think is the reason this gets cited?
So the aide's not doing what their care plan states. Either they're doing something that's not on the care plan, or they're doing something that's or they're not doing something that's on the care plan. So I found that, if you didn't put something like nail care on there, and you go on a supervisory visit and they're cutting the patient's nails, we have a problem, right?
Right. Right. And part of this is, 625 these are so key. 625 and 626. So 626 is the aid following that.
Right.
625 is the RN developing it. And I think lots of times our RNs fail to develop a individualized specific plan.
Agreed.
That leaves a lot of ambiguity for the aide, and rather than the aide calling to get clear direction, they just do what they think they're supposed to be doing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it,
Mhm.
that's really a key piece of where the patient and the family have to have input, not only to their overall plan of care, but the care plan, especially if you're going to personal care. What do they want? What do they don't want? What can they do? What can't they do? Right.
Right,
So yeah,
right.
it's important.
And the aid is so key in allowing, realizing there's starting to be changes in condition, right? Because they're doing care that's so personal. They may identify those first, and if they don't share that with the clinician, the plan may not be altered to go along with that change, right?
Yeah, untapped gold resource right there, our
Ex-
hospice aides.
I agree. I agree. I would have a say to me, well, I'm just an aide. And I'm like, I would get ballistic, don't say you're
Right.
just an aide. Okay. Number 6 is HCPC. Let's talk about the key performance area, HCPC, right now. That's where the assessment, the care planning, and the coordination occur in that key performance area. And so that's key to knowing what the patient's needs are and developing a plan to deal with those needs and coordinating with the team to ensure that everyone's able to do that. You would think that that particular key performance area would be very strong. You want it strong because it's the basis of the care for the patient. But
Right.
unfortunately, okay, I'm going to let you guess this time. What percentage of findings for 2022 came into this area?
42%.
You're a little high. 35, which is still
That's still high,
way.
though. That's really high.
That is
I
really
overshot
high.
it,
It
Bobbie.
is. I know, and I know why you did. Okay, so for hospice, that is ensuring that the RN ensures that the plan of care is followed and that the plan of care is individualized. Okay.
Right.
So remember that there is a designated RN that it has overall oversight of that team as they work together to meet the needs of the patient.
So this is where I'm
Right.
thinking it's really critical for organizations to invest in education for RNs about case management. What does case management look like? What does oversight of a plan of care look like? And, how do you manage that? So it's yes, we're all strapped for staff right now, but you can't shortchange the training just to get them out, throwing them out there when they don't necessarily have the skills or the tools to do good case management or care management for that patient and family.
Absolutely. I agree with you. I do. So our next number 5 is also an HCPC, and it goes with its 9.I, and it correlates with the LTAG 523, where the hospice IDG completes an initial comprehensive assessment no later than 5 calendar days after the election of hospice care.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I know that can be tight, but it's the reg. You got to get it done. Particularly, this strikes me, Bobbie, especially when we have um, shorter lengths of stay that are
Mm-hmm.
increasing in hospice care. It's so important. Well, whether they're there for 6 months or 6 weeks or 6 days, we have to
Mm-hmm.
get that process down. It's a regulatory requirement, but it's really about getting everything in line to make sure that patient has and the family has what they need right away.
Absolutely. And I've had some experience with that, unfortunately, recently. And those short length of times, I think the patient needs get met, but the family needs maybe not quite as well. And so I think that's something to be considering. And keep in mind that initial comprehensive assessment includes your social work assessment, which under HCDT, there are about 10 different elements that will be part of that assessment: your spiritual assessment and your initial bereavement assessment, right? So all of those components, need to be completed in that first 5 days. And I've been talking a lot with organizations that are having trouble getting that done, and we talk about how could they possibly teach their RNs to do a comprehensive initial bereavement assessment, right?
Yes, yes.
And they can use those disciplines that typically do it to do the training, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah. Well,
maybe make a template.
if you take time to read the preamble of the 2008 COPs, which you know what, Bobbie, every time I pick that up, I still learn something new, and I've read it
I
probably
believe it.
100 plus times, right? But what CMS is saying, here are the components that need to be assessed. While it's optimal to have psychosocial, emotional by a social worker, or bereavement by a spiritual or social worker, they understand that that might not happen all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there's some leeway in there. You should always strive for optimal, I think. But if you can't attain optimal, you have the contingency plan, like you're saying, train the RN, social worker, or spiritual care, train the RN to do at least a basic, as thorough as possible assessment, right?
Agreed. And I know that adds to their work, but I think over the last 2-3 years, we've really identified, patients didn't want 6 people coming into their home, and of course,
Right.
I'm exaggerating, but
Well,
you know
yeah,
what I'm
no, point
saying,
taken.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we've had to learn other ways to get some of these things done. Number 4 is under HSIM, which is information management, and it's LTAG 678, and it actually relates to the patient's clinical record containing past and current findings that are being maintained, and includes physician orders.
Mm.
Mm,
So I think a few
mm,
things here. I think, did they get all the information, clinical information at the time of admission? Maybe, maybe not. And are they following up and getting those signed orders back into the record? Particularly if they're from an outside attending physician. So,
mm-hmm.
few things there.
Yeah, I think so too. And I like that you said that, because one of the things that just shows is that, okay, there might be 10 organizations that have the same finding, but the root cause of receiving the finding could be different depending upon each organization,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
yeah, and to develop that plan to address that finding really needs to start with identifying why it's occurring. Okay, number 3, we're back to the key performance area of HCPC, 15.I, and this will not surprise you. It's LTAG 530, And the comprehensive assessment needs to include a drug profile that contains the patient's current prescription and over-the-counter drugs with medication regimen review process. So that review process needs to include identifying potential side effects, adverse effects, duplicate drug therapy. There's all kinds of elements of action that need to be done in that one standard, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, that really has been on the list for many a year now. And it's troubling because, just part of we as nurses, part of what you do is we go out on see a patient, but you do medication reconciliation, right? You have to
Mm-hmm.
look. You
Mm-hmm.
can't just say, "Oh, I was here, 2 days ago, so everything should be copacetic. Everything's okay."
Right.
But meanwhile, Miss Smith, talks to her doc and they've called in a new prescription and they didn't tell us. So, yeah, I mean, that's like, to me, that's like basic nursing to me.
Agreed. Agreed. One of the ways a site visitor identifies this is just by, the patient may have a complaint that's not really that's basic complaint like a headache, right? Or
Hmm.
arthritis or something. And so they'll say, what do you take for that headache? What do you take for that arthritis or whatever? Because hospice patients can still have pain that's not related to their terminal illness.
Absolutely.
And they might say Tylenol extra strength or whatever, right? And that's
Hmm.
how we identify, okay, there's things this patient is taking that's not, listed in their medication profile. So
Yeah.
just a little tip for you guys out there. all, all right. Number 2, HCDT, care delivery and treatment, 16.I, which is L626.
Ah,
This one also, Jennifer, yeah, I see. You know this one too. Hospice aid providing services in accordance with the IDG and the plan of care.
well, I mean, that makes sense. If you have a problem at 625, you're most likely going to have a problem at 626, right? If you don't have an
Yes,
RN who's doing an individualized care plan, we can't have an aide that's necessarily, yeah, as one variable following that. So,
absolutely, absolutely. Sometimes it's difficult to determine, is this really the root cause, really how the written plan of care was written, or is it that the aide isn't following it, right? That root cause
yeah,
sometimes
yeah.
is hard to identify.
I have
All
to tell you
right.
though, I'm so happy
Yeah.
you didn't tell me that it was the 14-day supervision, because that one,
Mhm.
I was
Mhm.
ready to be prostrated on the ground because it wouldn't come off the list for years and years and years. So, oh,
Okay, well, don't feel so good. Please don't feel so good because there's a waiver in place.
yeah, yeah, I know. I know. It's gonna come back. I know.
It will come back. I hate to tell you that, but it will. Okay, so number 1 is in that chapter that's cited 35% of the time, key performance area of care, planning and coordination. And the tag is L545, which is in regards to the patient's individualized written plan of care, including interventions based on problems identified in the initial and updated comprehensive assessments.
Yeah, that's a connect the dot thing, isn't it? It's
It
develop
is.
it and then you have to follow up. And I always call it, when I explain it out in the field, it's closing your loops. If you cited this as a problem, you have to keep documenting to it unless it's resolved, right?
Right,
And
right,
yeah, and you have to have a goal attached to it and interventions attached to it, and they have to be individualized. And, the electronic medical record is great, but sometimes I don't think it allows for that individualization unless you, as like a nursing administrator, say you have to go beyond point and click. And we expect you
right.
to have a free text paragraph that drills down to subjective things that you maybe heard from the patient or the caregiver or what have you. Extra information that goes beyond point and click.
Agreed. I agree with all of that. I think that it's kind of interesting that 5 out of the 10 standards that were cited in the top 10 came from hospice assessment, care planning, coordination. I would think that if you're a new organization out there, and you're listening right now to see what the top things are that are identified, that would be a good key performance area to start with a focused audit.
I can't agree more. And, CMS has said in program integrity information in their updated Appendix M, which is the interpretive guidelines for hospice, that they're focusing on 4 core. And what do you think are 2 of those 4 core?
We're right there, right?
We're right there.
Assessment and care planning.
Absolutely. So CMS is really, taking extra measures to make sure providers get it right. So we would do nothing less than the same on the CHAP side, right? We want our patients to have good quality, safe care.
That is very true. I think that's all that I have for you today, madam.
Well, that was really informative. Not too surprising for me, because a lot of the same usual suspects, if you will, from years past. But hopefully, providers will, our CHAP customers will take note of these and maybe avail themselves of one of those great trainings that you do, Bobbie, in order to push their compliance needle forward and resolve some of their if they've had deficiencies that pop up on that list that you just went over, that they can resolve some of that as well. So do you have any final thoughts for us as we wrap up?
Well, if an organization doesn't know where to start with their quality efforts, this top 10 is a good place to start, and conducting some focus audits. Implementing a sound quality program is going to be so key for them moving forward and being successful in their organizations.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. And we do have these linked on our website. Is that correct, Bobbie?
That is correct, on our chapping.org site under their services, I believe.
Well, that's great. And people should really take a look and make sure you're on top of it. Even if you're not in a survey year, you should be looking at this.
Oh, thank you for saying that, Jennifer. I get people that come to accreditation intensive when they're in the window. Being in the window for your site visit is way too late to be looking at compliance. The time to look at compliance is the day after the site visitor leaves forward.
Absolutely. Survey ready at any time, right?
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. Well, I want to just say from myself and Bobbie and the rest of the CHAP team, thank you for taking the time to plug into our podcast today. And hopefully you've taken a small pearl of wisdom away regarding the Hospice Top 10 Survey Deficiencies. So stay safe and well, and thanks for all you do.